Hello, my name is Voya and welcome to My Deep Guide, and in today's video we are going to be addressing the results of the investigation that I have, or independent investigation that I've started 2 weeks ago regarding the CPU differences that seemingly we are getting between different Note Air 3C units. What does that mean? Well, very shortly after the Note Air 3C started shipping out to users, it became clearly obvious that some units are coming with a CPU variant that reports 2.8 gigahertz and other variants are coming as per specification, the way they should be, with the 2.4 gigahertz of the CPU itself. This naturally caused a lot of questions, some concern, and some theories of conspiracy, of course, because it is, that's the day and age that we're living in. Everything is a freaking conspiracy. So I am not a proponent of these things. I like data, I like facts, and I like to know what is going on. So instead of speculating, I wanted to, kind of gather a little bit of data and see if I can get a little bit more of understanding of what is actually going on between this one. So what I did was I asked people on Reddit, on Facebook, on YouTube to actually who own Note Air 3C units to perform a series of tests, send me their results so that I can accumulate them in a nice database and then see what seems to be the thing. Now, before we dive into the data, I want to just give you my preliminary conclusions and findings, what seems to be the case that is happening here between the different Note Air 3C units. What seems to be happening is, I don't have that confirmation from Boox or a direct one. There's an indirect one, as you'll see later on. But I think that it was a supply chain issues or inconsistencies. During the procurement phase, that Boox said, hey, we need SM6225 SoCs. That is the version of the CPU that we want to have in our Note Air 3C. But what seems to have happened is that not all SM6225 Qualcomm SoCs are the same. There is a difference, and here's what that difference actually is. This is what I suspect what we have going on with two variants of the SoCs on two different on Note Air 3C variants. As you can see, we have two variants of the SM6225 chips, and they're both called SM6225, except that the other one is -AD. Now they should have a different Snapdragon nomenclature here, 680 versus 685, to make them different, but everything else kind of fits, because the regular 6225 or the Snapdragon 680 is the one that has 4 cores of 1.9 gigahertz and 4 cores at 2.4 gigahertz, with the GPU being Adreno 610, but at the core at the clock GPU clock at 1114 megahertz. Everything else is pretty much the same. There are some small differences here and there. The major one is that we have like a Bluetooth 5.1 versus Bluetooth 5.2, but that's not such a huge difference here. But this is the most meaningful one here, is basically in these fields, 4 fields here. Because if we look at the Snapdragon 685 or the SM6225AD variant of the CPU, we'll have the same 1.9 gigahertz of 4 cores and the other 4 cores at 2.8 gigahertz, which is exactly what we are seeing in the Note Air 3C different units. And the additional difference here is also the same GPU, but running at a slightly higher clock at 1260 megahertz. So this is what we are going to be looking at. And if this supposition is correct, that that what we are seeing in different Note Air 3C units, that all of them should have been equipped with the SM6225 variant or the Snapdragon 680, but some of them, due to supplier I don't know, inconsistencies, error or something like that, that some of them have been equipped with the SM6225AD variant of the system on a chip, then we should have a consistent difference in favor of 2.8 gigahertz or the Snapdragon 685, both in the CPU and in the GPU performance. Okay, so that is something that actually makes a lot of sense how it would happen during the procurement phase of production. So that actually tracks perfectly, and it's something that can easily happen. Now, what about the data that I've collected? What does that actually tell us? So what is the actual difference between the units that basically have Snapdragon 685 and Snapdragon 680 SoCs? Let's check out the data. All right, so here is an overview of the database that I've collected. So it's like 43 valid results. There was 2 that were invalid because they were either completely incomplete or that the result simply didn't make any sense whatsoever. So yeah, the 43 ones are here. Not all users ran the GPU compute simply because either the device was unable to complete it or they didn't want to wait, which is also perfectly understandable, but there was enough to actually get the averages out and to get the whole point of this thing. Now, here are my results, but of course I'm not going to bug you with this. I'm going to be showing you lovely little charts so that you can see what we mean here. So in order to actually quantify the data that I've collected, I am using both the median differences and the mean differences or values between these different categories. And the different categories are, of course, CPU performance with a single core, CPU performance with a multi-core core, and the GPU performance. So basically the whole SoC, because that's what is different. Everything else is pretty much the same. The top 2 are basically 2.8 and 2.4 versions median values, and these are mean or average values. So you can take whatever you believe is the more relevant data piece. So I will include both median and mean so that people can actually take that into consideration. So if we're taking into consideration the CPU single performance, the median value of the 2.8 gigahertz variant of the CPU score was 479, while the median score of the 2.4 gigahertz single core was 417, and then we have the average 454 for the 2.8 gigahertz version and 399.48 for the 2.4 gigahertz version. So we see a logical difference in CPU performance, single-core performance, between the 2 different CPU variants. Then we go to the CPU multi, and we have the score of median score of 1575 for the 2.8 gigahertz version and the 1464 or 1464 for the 2.4 gigahertz, and the average is 1545.91 and 1409.73 for the 2.4 gigahertz version. And this is why, for me personally, median is a more meaningful value, because some small deviations or inconsistencies in a test will not offset the score as they have offset it really by a lot. And there was basically, I don't know, one score running a lot lower, probably because the device was multitasking in the background while it was performing a test or anything. So for my preference, I am pretty much guided by the median, but I'm just offering the average or the mean here for those who may be interested in it as well. And then we go to the GPU compute, and we have 380 versus 345 between 2.8 and 2.4, and 370 versus 336. So right across the board, we have a difference, consistent difference in performance, whether it is single core, multi-core, or the GPU core between these two CPU variants. And all of it makes sense because we have a operational clock difference on both the GPU and the CPU in this SoC. Now, what this actually means is I needed to calculate a median or a mean difference, for those who are interested, the difference value between the performances. So this is what this chart is showing. So we have a 12.94% or a 12.08%, depending on which value you're looking at, but roughly 12% difference in performance between, in CPU single core performance between the two CPU variants, of course, in favor of the 2.8 gigahertz version. When we bump it up to CPU multi-core performance difference, we have 7.05 for median and 8.88% difference between the two. So whichever value you take, it's around 7 to 8% difference, performance difference between the 2.8 and 2.4 gigahertz CPUs. And we have a fairly unified score here with the GPU at 9.21 for median and 9.35 for mean difference. So around 9% difference between the GPU performance of the SoC, different SoCs. So in order to actually summarize all of this data, this is like broken down to get it kind of a little bit better, but the summary is the most important one here. So the SoC is the system on a chip, and that is basically what's different. We have an SoC variant which has a different CPU variant and a different GPU variant as well, all running at slightly different clocks as described before. So the overall median performance difference of the SoC is 9.73%, and the average or the mean SoC performance difference is 10%. So we can roughly say that the difference, performance difference between the 2.8 and the 2.4 gigahertz version, purely in a synthetic way, right, on the score here, is around 10% in favor of the 2.8 gigahertz versions of the Note Air 3C. And then finally, the part that was interesting, with a very small sample size of like 43 units. So that's a small sample size. It would have been nicer to actually have an even more, but this is what we got. And from that sample size, 26.19% of the devices were the version of 2.8 gigahertz, and the remaining 73.81 are the regular or thus regularly scheduled programmed version of the Note Air 3C with the 2.4 gigahertz. So roughly a quarter of devices are with the 2.8 gigahertz version, which thoroughly debunks the whole theory that was kind of, being proposed that Boox has intentionally sent out the 2.8 gigahertz unit versions to reviewers only. Well, that's really not true, because the quarter of sold devices and a quarter of users who reported their findings are basically with the 2.8 gigahertz variant. And here was one really, really important and interesting submission here. And that one actually is a submission by one of the users who has the 2.4 gigahertz variant of the CPU, or the Note Air 3C. And this user actually ran both the PCMark and the PassMark performance test, which is really, really cool to see, because it can actually, especially a PassMark performance, because PCMark will show what is the real world difference between the Note Air 3C with a 2.4 and a 2.8 gigahertz variant, because I have the 2.8. I ran all of these, and this person had 2.4, and they ran all of those. And the PassMark performance test gives us a breakdown, and then we can actually compare in more details where the difference is here. So for me, let's check out the PassMark or the PCMark performance here first. And this here, this fourth one, the fifth one, the green one, is the Note Air 3C. So my version of 2.8 gigahertz work score, and that's your real world performance score of the tablet, not just the CPU, but the whole shebang, the whole tablet. How will it perform? My tablet performed at 5,286 of the work score, and the 2.4 gigahertz version performed at 5,243. So that 43-point difference is so small that it can actually fall in the margin of error. And this just confirms that while, yes, there is a difference with the CPU that is there, so there's a different variant of the CPU, the likelihood that the user is actually going to see any difference or feel any difference between the different units is simply not correct. You will not be able to feel or see any difference between different Note Air 3C versions. And this is also confirmed with the storage, because the 2.4 GHz version scored at 15,062, which is actually higher than the 14,788 that my unit at 2.8 GHz scored. Of course, the CPU speed doesn't have anything to do with the storage speed, so that's a good thing to see, that while the CPU variants are different, the storage controllers are the same, therefore the storage control speed is pretty much the same. And then we get to the pass mark performance test. Again, the fifth one here, the same green is the result of the Note Air 3C. This is my Note Air 3C. So the 2.4 GHz predictably had a lower CPU value, so 3,698, so 3,700 versus 3,874. So that is in line with that CPU variant difference. What surprised me though was that there was also a memory difference, and a significant memory difference, because the 2.4 GHz version scored 15,600 while the 2.8 GHz scored 17,390. So it would be around here somewhere. So that is a significant difference both in the CPU and in the memory score. But then we get to this score read and write was actually, both of them were considerably higher on the 2.4 GHz version, which is consistent with the PC mark as well. So 538 megabytes per second of read speed versus 495, and 384 megabytes of write speed versus 348 megabytes of write speed on the 2.8 gigahertz version. So consistently, the disk performance is actually faster on the 2.4 gigahertz version. Not by a lot, but by a tiny little bit. So that's also an important thing to keep in mind. And then finally we have the 2D score, which was equal, pretty much equal, within margin of error, 8,899 versus 8,816. And the 3D score, which is predictably higher on the 2.8 gigahertz version, because the GPU, the built-in GPU in the SoC, runs at a slightly higher clock, as we have already discussed earlier. So the 2.4 gigahertz version, or 2.4 gigahertz CPU variant, scores 17,765 versus 19,210, and yeah, that all again tracks because this is a part of the SoC. So thanks to that person who submitted this, because it's a very, very good and insightful thing. And I think that the most important part, if you need to take anything out of it, is this work score, because it is virtually identical, and that is exactly what you will see in the real world scenario. So here is the email with the questions and the findings that I've sent to my Boox contact. And I simply report what I've talked about here, what the survey actually and the data actually showed. So I had the following questions for Boox because I was interested primarily in these three things. Question number one that I had was, have you identified the problem, and can you comment on if there have been measures put in place to remedy the issue, and if yes, measures of what kind? Question number two, can you confirm that it is indeed the case that some units ended up with the SM6225AD CPU variant, even though SM6225 CPU variant was supposed to be the SoC by design? And number three, are you aware of any reviewer to whom a review sample device has been sent to by Boox or other related channels that has received a 2.4 GHz version of the Note Air 3C unit? If not, was this by intent or something else? And do you have a comment on the concern expressed by some users who view this is suspicious and or cause for concern? So those are the 3 questions that I've sent to Boox, and here is their response. So I'm going to read the entirety of the response because it's not directly relating to the questions, and it's, in my view, it's not really a satisfactory response, but this is what we got. So, hi Voya, I want to express my sincere gratitude for your investigation into this matter. First and foremost, our product specifications clearly indicate the use of 2.4 GHz processor relying on the Qualcomm 6225 platform. So that would be a direct answer to, I guess, one of the questions that it was supposed to be by design. So this information is prominently displayed on both our product's packaging and product pages. This is a little bit overly defensive as far as I'm concerned, but okay, I don't know. I don't know why, but it reads as a little bit defensive. It is our expectation that consumers are well informed and the product's performance should align with the specifications provided on our product pages and packaging. I don't fully understand what is the point of this sentence, but okay. This ensures the customers can confidently trust that they will receive a product with performance levels consistent with our advertised specifications. And this is actually true because it's not the case that some of the units that are shipped out are performing under the advertised specifications. It's simply the case that some of the units have received a CPU variant that is going to perform, as we've seen, roughly 9 to 10% faster as far as the CPU and GPU goes than the proposed default design. But in reality, as we've seen in those work scores, that there's no difference whatsoever. So yeah, this tracks and this makes sense. Regarding the differences in benchmark scores, these can be attributed to minor variations in CPU components sourced from different suppliers during the procurement process. So this is basically saying that, yeah, it's pretty much what happened is that they are getting variations in the CPU components that are sourced from different suppliers. So it can happen that some suppliers had SM6225 and other suppliers had SM6225AD, and yeah, that's basically what happened. Specific model information falls within the realm of business confidentiality and authorized agreements, making it something we're unable to disclose. This part I don't really get at all. This is like equivalent to Samsung or Apple or somebody else saying that, oh, because of business confidentiality and authorized agreements, we can't tell you which CPU exactly we have inside. That, I don't know. I don't know what kind of confidentiality agreements and licensing agreements they have, but this is the first time that I actually hear that a company is unable to disclose the specific model information of the specifications of their device. So, okay, but that's their response. It is essential to emphasize that the products we provide to reviewers are identical to those available in the market, with no differentiations or special treatment. We prioritize fair evaluations and maintain customer trust, with no intention of providing superior devices to influence review results. So that is addressing the third question there, and basically confirms what the data also confirms, with a quarter of the devices basically being the 2.8 gigahertz variant. There's no way that they were able to actually kind of make this happen. It just seems to be the case that the early units that were produced were using those, amongst others. They were sourcing those 2 chips, and the reviewers are naturally getting the first production line devices. So I think that actually makes perfect sense. Of course, this incident has also provided valuable insights into our marketing and supply chain teams. We have learned that the importance of reviewing and updating our brand's product supply policy to ensure that all customers consistently enjoy the same products without unnecessary hassle. We're committed to taking proactive steps to minimize any variance in products and enhance overall customer satisfaction. So this is like a boilerplate saying nothing, lots of words saying absolutely nothing of substance regarding my first question, which was, have you identified the problem? Probably, yeah, it's the supplier chain. And are you doing something? Yeah, but we're not going to tell you what. Okay, cool. That's basically what that means to me. And then we greatly appreciate your understanding in this matter. If you have any further questions or concerns, please do not hesitate to reach us. And that's that. All right, so those are the results of my independent investigation. I want to extend a heartfelt thanks to all of the users who've actually supplied this data. And even though it is a smaller 43 kind of sample size, it is still significant enough to actually get some kind of meaningful type of patterns and conclusions out of this whole thing. So thank you so very much for being helpful and for making this actually a possibility to, you know, just understand what it is that seems to have happened with the Note Air 3C and why there are different versions. And ultimately, beyond everything else, does it even matter? So here's the conclusion on most important stuff. First and foremost, was this a deliberate attempt by Boox to actually trick the customers? And unequivocally, this is a hard no, because as we've seen, we have quarter or over a quarter of devices on the market are equipped with that one, and it is entirely logical, and it's something that always happens if you have two variants of the same CPU that has the same number, but it's differing just on the end letters. You know, likelihood that the supplier is gonna supply you with one or the other variant of the same CPU are actually quite high. So all of this actually tracks and makes perfect logical sense. And as far as I'm concerned, I don't think that the results of this investigation have any kind of proof or anything like that, even a hint towards that Boox has done this intentionally or by design of any kind. Question number 2 was, what is the actual difference? I don't have a direct confirmation, but everything in the data points towards that difference between Snapdragon 680 and Snapdragon 685. And the most important of all, the only question that is worthy of an answer is, does it matter? And the answer is absolutely not. While there are differences in scores in these benchmarks, I have carefully selected which benchmark tests to do so that I can actually see those differences, because I knew that if I told everyone to do the PC benchmark work test, that we would have no differences almost whatsoever. And that is exactly what we've seen in that one example between 2.8 and 2.4 gigahertz. You know, these are only 4 cores of the CPU that are turboing occasionally up to a higher frequency than on the other variant. And the amount of times that you're gonna be stressing out all 8 cores and causing them to actually turbo to the maximum to achieve their entire potential on an e-ink, e-reader, e-note taker tablet is extremely minimal. So there's very few times and cases where you might actually even count the difference in your work performance. Now the CPU and, you know, synthetic benchmarks, they're designed to extract that difference and to actually measure it. That's what I've done here. But in reality, you're not going to see a difference between a 2.4 or a 2.8 gigahertz version of the Note Air 3C other than a curiosity, hey, which version do I have? In reality, you are going to have the exact same performance and the exact same user experience, whichever version of the Note Air 3C you might have ended up with. All right, I hope that this video investigation data and findings and conclusion helps everyone understand a little bit better what is going on, what has happened. I'm fairly satisfied with the conclusion and with the findings, because they make a lot of sense. There's not too many question marks that are left out there, because I'm fairly certain, like 99.9% certain, that this is exactly what we have here. I'm even more pleased to see the data that it actually doesn't matter which version you have, and that the blunder that has happened with probably, supposedly, allegedly happened with the supply chain during the procurement process of the production of the Note Air 3C is not going to negatively impact any of the customers. It can only theoretically positively impact a quarter of our customers, because they will end up with a slightly faster turboing system on a chip in their Note Air 3C. But the most important point is that it's not the other way around. It's not the case that some users are ending up with slower device than what the specifications and the marketing and the advertisement has actually said that Note Air 3C will be. Let me know in the comments down below, how satisfied are you with the results of this investigation video and data that I have actually shown here? Is there anything else that somebody might be interested in regarding this whole issue? And also just, let me know in comments down below what your thought and opinion is about this whole thing. If you like the video, if you found it useful, if you found it informative, please do like and subscribe. It does help the channel, and because mydeepguide is a fully independent channel, I also invite you to check out the mydeepguide.com/shop, where you can find MDO and MMP. Those are hyperlinked PDF files. MDO helps you organize your yearly, quarterly, monthly, weekly, daily, private or business needs, and MMP is My Deep Guide Meeting Planner, which helps you centralize, organize, and simplify your meeting planning needs. If you are interested in learning more about these products, do check out the playlist links in the description below to learn more about the products and see if they are for you or not. Thank you so much for watching. Stay safe, stay healthy, and see you in the next video. Bye.